You're visiting the Mom Next Door and our stories of faith. I'm glad you dropped by for a visit. Please stay a while and hear what the Lord has done in the lives of moms just like you and me. Hi, welcome to the Mom Next Door, Stories of Faith. And today I have with me my friend Nancy, who has been busy with foster care on and off throughout the years. And I've asked her to come join us and tell us a little bit of her story and her journey in foster care. So to start out, Nancy, I was just going to see if you could tell me how you met Robbie. How did you meet your husband, and maybe a little bit of the background about your family, your children?
Well, I met my husband working at a summer camp when I was 16 and he was 18. We started dating that next year, and we were married a couple years after that. We got married when I was 19 and he was 21. We have 5 biological kids and a couple more that we were foster parents to that we never adopted, but were still in their lives a good majority of the time.
Yeah, and that is one reason why I thought you'd be such a great person to talk to about this topic, because I know it wasn't like we fostered, we had them and we were done. They carried on in your heart. You've stayed in connection with them, and you still have a relationship with those children, from what I understand.
Yes.
Yeah, always their mama in a special way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So what sparked your interest in foster care in the start? How'd you get started? Like, how you heard the need, or you just always had this instilled in, like, you've always wanted to do it, or how did you come about deciding?
Well, we never actually started out with the state to be foster parents. Um, Growing up, my neighbors, they were foster parents and they adopted, and that really gave me a heart for adoption. I saw the pain uh, that happens when foster kids leave, and that
Mm.
really hit me hard. And I didn't want to live that, so um, we actually got certified to be an adoptive placement. They call it a front door family, and we weren't going to do foster care. We were just going to have children placed in our home, which it still would be foster care until an adoption is finalized. But we had no interest in just being foster parents. But God had other plans, and He dropped children in our laps a couple of times to be foster parents for, and that's just how uh, how the Lord gave it to us.
It's funny because we have an idea of how we think things are going to run and what we think is going to happen, and then we find out God's like, well, I was just warming you up for something, and I have a really
Exactly.
awesome plan for you that you did not even imagine. So
Yes.
the first time, so you've done a couple different groups. You've had some sibling groups and some individual ones, right?
Okay. Yeah. So when we were first certified, we sent our home study in for several children for a committee to look at. And we did that for a while. We went to committee a couple of times, and we're just kind of in the waiting phase. And then there was actually a foster child that we knew that needed a new foster placement. And so we knew him really well. I had babysat him, and that's just how it happened. Um we called our caseworker, his other foster parents called their caseworker, and we made it happen. And we had him for about 2.5 months. Um,
Was that at that point were you still thinking adoption, or was that the point where you started to be like, well, maybe we will just do foster and not carry it all the way through to adoption?
well, with him, it was um, there was a possibility of him going to adoptive placement where a couple of his biological siblings had gone, but there was a chance of him being up for adoption. And so that's why we took him, is because since we already knew him and had
Right.
known him since he was a baby, that could have been a good situation. And so we took him because he needed a place to be and there was a potential
Right.
to adopt. And so at that point, that's we took him because he needed a place to land. And we weren't really veering off the course at all. He eventually, paperwork did come through. He was able to be adopted with his siblings, which was fantastic. Um, and it was actually the same week that all of that was happening. A friend that I attended church with in the past messaged me and said, "Hey, I saw that your little guy is going to the home that his siblings went to, and you're going to have openings." She said, "My husband is a caseworker in our county, and he's really needing a home for a toddler and a baby that's due in the next couple of months. Is there any chance that I could give him your information?" And, I always jump at those chances. I would have said yes on the spot, but I called my husband and he said, he's like, "Well, I don't think so." It was just still kind of raw with our first foster placement and the potential of keeping him, the little guy that we'd known for so long. And so we were just still kind of reeling from how fast all of that happened. Um, and so I told him, I said, "Well, I don't want to tell them no. Why don't you sleep on it and pray about it, and we'll talk about it tomorrow." And we just left it alone. And in the morning, my phone started ringing, and it was DHS. And I texted my husband and I said, "They're calling. What should I tell them?" And he said, "Sure, why not? Let's do it." And so
Right.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
I said, "Well, so sleeping on it helped, huh?" And I mean, he wouldn't admit that, obviously, but yeah, so we moved forward with it, and that weekend we transitioned our little guy to his foster or his adoptive placement, which was in another state, so it was pretty quick. And then that next Monday or Tuesday, I picked up our 2.5-year-old, and that was actually the day that his baby brother was born. And the next day, I picked up his baby brother from the hospital.
Oh, wow. So that moved like really quickly for you.
Yes, we were not sure when baby was due. We were expecting him about 4 to 8 weeks later, but he came the same day that I got big brother.
Wow. And was he preemie? It was a little bit like you didn't have to stay in the NICU with him or anything.
He was not preemie.
Yeah.
There was just some confusion on DHS's part as to when he was due.
Right. So, okay. So then you have these two little ones. And at the time, how you didn't have all your biological at that time. You had how many at
We
home?
had two biological children. So when our youngest foster was born, we had a 3.5-year-old, and then our 2.5-year-old foster, a 14-month-old, and then the newborn foster. So we had 4, 3 and under for quite some time.
Yeah, you did. I had 4, 3 and under, but it was only for 6 weeks. And then
Mhm.
because my twins were born when my oldest was almost 4. And so it was like 6 weeks from the time my twins were born until my oldest turned 4. So yeah, but those are like such busy times where it's like, keep the diaper bag filled, keep, like you're just barely doing stuff. But wow, God comes through and he covers it and gives you the energy and what you need to focus on the people that he gives you.
Yes.
So what was a challenge? Like what was the biggest challenge of jumping from, because then you kind of went from 2 children to 3. Well, you did 2 to then 3, then to 4. It was just
Hmm.
2 to 3 minus 1 back to 2. So,
Yeah, we went like 2 days with back to two.
right, right. So what was I hear people say that the biggest transition is going from 2 to 3, but
Hmm.
you like me kind of went from 2 to 4.
Yeah.
So how was that? You have any adjustment things?
Honestly, everything happened so quickly. We kind of just had to jump straight into survival mode. Um, because it takes a lot to have for that young, but in a way, there's things that are easier because they're all close to the same age. They're all doing close to the same things. You don't have teenagers and middle-aged kiddos and toddlers. And so in that aspect, it's easier. The main struggle was having all of the different appointments. We had appointments with doctors. Our youngest Foster had some breathing issues, asthma, and he got a lot of respiratory infections. And so we had a lot of doctor's appointments. He had ear tubes placed at one point, just because all of his health issues were causing inflammation in his ears. Um, and then, lawyers' appointments, court dates, visits with bio parents, all of that is the biggest struggle.
Yeah,
Is
I would
working
imagine.
within the system, especially when you have other children. Um, so we relied a lot on babysitters, and I find it very difficult to ask for help from anyone, but I had to learn very quickly to ask whenever I needed help.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to say to go on that jump so quickly. And I hadn't even thought about all the different appointments and
Hmm.
lawyers and court dates and stuff. So do you feel like you were supported well by your community? Where did that support come from? Probably a little bit from your family and a little bit from church, or were you kind of having to pay out of pocket babysitter?
Um, we did once. At one point, we started having uh, twice weekly babysitters, um, and house cleaning help. But that it took a while to get to that point. We actually moved in the middle of all of it because we lived in a town that was far away from the DHS office, and we had church in that city as well. And so there were actually several days where I drove back and forth the 30-40 minute drive like 3 times in one day. And at that point, we said, okay, we need to just move. And so we moved about 10 minutes away from the DHS office and 20 minutes away from church, and it was fantastic. But yeah, we really had a lot of help. Um, People, I did learn to ask, but people said yes. And people really came out of the woodwork, people that I had never um, had any help from before were very, very fantastic. When we picked up our little guys, we even had a meal train started for us, which is not super common in the foster care world, at least from my experience, is there's not a lot of celebration when a new child comes in because sometimes they can just come and go and come and go. And so we had a lot of support from the get-go.
What I love that I'm hearing is so many times I think people look at children and think, well, if I have another child, or if I adopt a child, or if I foster a child, they're just going to have to fit into my life. They're going to have to fit into my lifestyle. They're going to have to, what room in my physical house is there going to be for them to take part? But I just love your heart in you're saying, I'm here for these babies. I'm here for these children. And the children are what comes first, and our household may change. I mean, you completely moved to a different city to be closer to um, take care of their needs and have their appointments and deal with the logistics of that, instead of saying, this just isn't working. We're living too far out. We're just going to be done with this. You guys, it's like you put the children are what is important. And if God has laid it on your heart to minister to these children, there's all these creative solutions and the body of Christ to come around you and make it happen. And I love that.
And see, yeah, that's the thing is you when you're a foster parent, you really have to be all in, which not exactly sure how to word this, but a lot of people said to us, well, I couldn't be a foster parent because I would get too attached. It would be too hard to let the children go. Um, and I just don't want to do that. But the thing is these children, they need you to become attached. They need you to be completely gutted when they leave. They need that kind of attachment because that's not something they've ever had. They need people that will act and feel like they're true parents. And so a lot of times people would say that to me, and I would say, well, if you feel that way, you're the kind of person that probably should be a foster parent. If you
Oh, yeah.
feel like you would be too attached, I mean, there's not a such there's not a thing as too attached, in my opinion. But you really need those people that will do everything for those children. We really, really need that.
And it's not just you all in. When you as mom and dad go all in and you commit to parent these foster children,
Mm-hmm.
then they're also siblings to your other children, which means it's really you're sharing that servant's heart and that care for the least of these kind of thing. And you're able to, it's a family ministry where you guys are all like, hey, we're all in. And I'm sure that that's another thing that, I have never, had. We think about, well, how is mom doing after the foster care? The children end up going back to, and the goal is reunification. I know it's like the
Yes.
best thing that can happen is for the parents to go, or the children to go back to their biological parents. Like that's the dream.
Yes.
And so it's like rejoicing in that, but then even I'm sure helping your own children, your biological children, navigate, wow, this is a loss, but yet we're happy for them. It's a loss for us, but we're so happy that they can be with their mom and dad or one of those too. So
Yes, there's definitely extra layers to if you're a foster parent and you have other children in the home. There's a lot of extra things that you have to think about and work through.
right. So what would be, if somebody was considering fostering, what kind of advice would you give them? Like what kind of things do they need to, is there like a list, like you're thinking about doing this and these are the factors you need to consider? Or you just kind of, if God puts it on your heart, then you just figure it out as you go along? Or is
Yes, when we first started considering adopting through the state, the first thing that we did was attend an information session. It wasn't foster care training, it wasn't anything big. It was at a coffee shop downtown, and one of the PR guys from DHS just had an info night. And we went to that. And that told us a lot of what we needed to know. Probably my number one piece of advice, besides just talking to foster parents that have gone through it and, talking to all your friends that have done it before, is go get trained. There's foster care training. You can do it through your county or you can do it through the Boys and Girls Club. I think it's been years, and so I think it's the Boys and Girls Club that can offer training. But even if you don't decide to pursue foster care or adoption through the state, going through that training is fantastic and can help you decide if that's something you want to pursue or not.
And I'd imagine that would really give you, like, if I was to go through that and I chose not to in the end, afterwards, after going through that training, it would definitely give me a view into the life of foster care and all the components. And it might make me a better friend or a better support to those who are doing it, because I would kind of understand a little bit more of.
So how has this whole journey just grown your faith? What are there some good spiritual lessons that you've learned and the Lord has just shown up and shown himself to you in a new way because of this?
Definitely, yes. There's a lot that I feel like I'm very different now than I was when I started our foster care journey, just because God teaches you so much through it. And I'll try to touch on a couple points.
Well, you probably have way more than we could ever fit on this one thing.
Yes.
I'm sure that it's like buckets and buckets of stories.
One of the main things that I have learned, or I'll say, is that when I started our foster care journey, I had a very hard heart towards biological parents, because in my experience with foster children growing up, our neighbors were foster parents. They came from some really bad situations and some very abusive families. And so I didn't really see beyond that. And even when we got our first placements, it was very difficult to think kindly towards the biological parents. And what I learned really is to have a lot of grace and a lot of love towards them, because all in all, there's so many different reasons as to why the state steps in to have your children in foster care, and many, many different reasons why parents can't parent for a time or for the long haul. And so, at least in our cases, there was not abuse. There were a lot of different reasons why they couldn't parent at that time. But I guess you could say my heart has just softened towards them. We still know the biological parents that we were foster parents for, and they have hearts of gold. I mean,
you're a lot less likely to make assumptions about somebody when you know their story and you kind of hear their hearts, and maybe this is a situation that's gone on and they can use some help. But to just, if once you know them, then it does soften your heart. So developing that compassion and seeing people with new eyes is something that is applicable in all areas of our life. And I can just imagine if we all had a little more of that compassion in us, that we would just grow our community in a huge way. So I haven't gone through all that training. I haven't had foster children in my home. So help me understand, what could I do as just another believer that sees you being a foster parent? How can I come around you and support you? How can I just bless you for what you're doing and in what you're doing to like cheer you on and keep you going?
A lot of the best ways, especially if you know someone personally that's a foster parent, is just treat it as someone that just had a baby, and take them a care package. Take them some items that mom could relax a little bit, or
I saw a lot of coffee deliveries going to your house.
Yes. Coffee deliveries are fantastic, especially when you're running to all ends of the town all day long. Take a meal, offer to babysit. Babysitting is up to foster parents. At least in our county, we didn't have to have certified babysitters licensed through the state or anything like that. It was kind of our prerogative who we wanted to babysit. And if you don't personally know someone that's a foster family, you can be involved without becoming a foster parent. You can be a respite provider, which that can be anything from babysitting here and there to keeping kids for a weekend or keeping kids for longer than that. And so you do have to go through some training.
So what if I'm not going to be like hands-on? Like my hands are full. I'm not going to be able to go be a hands-on care provider, even respite. But I love the heart of what you're doing. I love children and I do want to invest in them. Is it helpful to like pick up, I would imagine even picking up a package of wipes or bringing in, giving a book or some other thing? That's probably, the tangible items are important too, aren't they?
Yeah. And I mean, especially things like consumable things like diapers and wipes. Each county does provide a small stipend for the children's needs, but that's not always enough. I mean, a lot of the times it covers a lot of the basics, but for a while, our foster son, he was on a very specialized formula, something that WIC wouldn't cover. So we covered it out of pocket. And so the stipend was very helpful. So yeah, wipes, stuff like that. And like you said, a book, little things for the kids. I mean, the foster kiddos have been through so much. Anything to show them love and show them a little bit of normalcy is fantastic.
And I think sometimes we're afraid. Like how many years have I known you? I've known you for a lot of years, and I've known you've done foster care. But to actually say, hey, would you sit down and have a conversation with me about it? We've never done that. And I've known you for probably almost 10 years. And so that's something that maybe we could do, is engage in those conversations to even say, hey, I know you're doing this. What do you need? Like, how can I be supportive and finding those people? And if you don't have somebody that you directly know, my guess is if you go to your own local church or another local church and just ask them, hey, can connect me? I want to know, is there a family that I can bless? Then that would be a huge help to connect and to be able to support foster care.
When you sign up to foster care, then the children you bring in, they're getting different therapies and different that type of thing. Do you have some sort of ongoing, there continuing ed that you do?
You do have to keep your training and certification up. And so after a certain period of time, you have to redo the training. There are foster parent support groups. In our county, some of the bigger churches, it's changed the church that does it. They do foster parent nights out so that foster parents can get a little bit of a break. They can, spend some time with other foster parents, have a meal prepared for them, things like that. There's also more along the lines of a break, not continuing education. There's respite providers available. So if you need a night or so away just to recuperate, you can find a respite provider. We never utilized any of that because we had friends and family and our church family that was behind us. And if we ever needed a babysitter, we always had one. We never took trips without our foster children. If we went on a trip, we got the clearance to take them with us because we felt very strongly about them being part of the family. And so we took them with us. But I do understand if you have older foster children, some children that have been through a lot of trauma, a lot of hardship, sometimes you do need a break. And so I understand where those respite providers come into play.
And so the respite providers would also have gone through all the foster care training.
Yeah.
And they would kind of be like, you were a long-term foster care parent, but there are some who even just do respite and can take children for shorter. It's like foster care for the children when the foster care families need a break, from what I understand.
Yeah, no, I know people who are just respite providers. And so, occasionally, like there's a list. Our county had a list of respite providers, or if you knew somebody, you could go with them. But basically, they're just more along the lines of a trained babysitter.
Right. And I think if I remember right, because we've been at some events together, and it seems to me that when you are fostering a child, you can't just say, why don't you watch them and I'm going to go take off for the weekend. You have to have somebody who is certified to be the one to be with them, if I understood that correctly.
Yes, the rules vary from place to place.
Right.
If you're going to take off overnight on a trip, you do need
Right.
to have some training, get clearance from caseworkers. But when it comes, at least in our county, during the time that we were foster parents, if we wanted to just have a babysitter, that was the foster parents' prerogative. They didn't have to have any special training.
So one verse that I was thinking of when I thought about foster care was James 1:27, that says, "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless, to look after orphans and widows in their distress." And I know that foster children are not orphans, but they are kind of parentless at that point. When they're in the foster system, they don't have, there's an issue that they can't, their parents are tied up with something, they're not going to be on their own. So in a way it is, and that's something that we as believers need to be available to step in and have a heart to listen for the need. And I just think it's great that you guys have been available, and I hope that somebody is inspired through this to pursue and consider and take care of those children.
But I think probably, like so many things in life, the very best thing we can do is to pray for the foster children, to pray for the families that are going through it, and even the families who are temporarily without their children, that the Lord will just work in those situations. And so why don't we do that? Why don't we pray for the foster families right now? So, dear Lord, I thank you for this families that you have given us. I thank you for the model of families. And sometimes things are rough. Sometimes there's trouble, but your heart is for a family to be reconciled. And so, Lord, I pray for more foster families to be raised up, that families would accept these children and be all in, that they would accept them as their own, that they would love on them, and that they would show them your love. Lord, I just pray that you would equip families to step up and be foster parents. In your name, amen. Now, Nancy, if anybody wanted to find you and follow you, where are they going to go?
Instagram is a good option. If you want to go see my pictures of my kids and pictures of food. I post a lot of pictures of food. You can send me a direct message if you have any questions for me. I'm at raising.my.hooligans on Instagram.
It was good to talk to you, and we'll talk to you later.
Whatever is true.